My name is Robert Bonavito, New Jersey forensic accountant. This video is part of a series of videos where I discuss forensic accounting topics for educational purposes only. If this was a litigated matter, I would take a different approach, have different conclusions based on different facts.
Hi, welcome to the last section of our divorce and matrimonial discussion. Today we're going to talk about key terms because I think it's important that you understand these terms, and most of them you will, but let's just go through them because you're going to hear them in court. You're going to hear them, you're going to read about them, you're going to see them in your agreements. The first one is moneyed spouse, non-moneyed spouse. This is a politically correct way of discussing males, who's the breadwinner, who's not. And also with same-sex marriages, this is used a lot because, if Frank and Frank or Sue and Sue are getting divorced, usually you have the moneyed spouse, non-moneyed spouse. Again, this is a politically correct, convenient way to discuss things with the marriage. Dissipation. Dissipation is when money was taken out of the marriage and used for purposes not for the marriage. Like, for example, somebody who has a gambling problem, an alcohol problem, or a girlfriend, all that money is dissipation. And all that money will come back into the marriage in figuring out lifestyle. A Daubert challenge is usually a challenge of an expert's report. If it's not written properly, it can be challenged and thrown out. So, there's always a Daubert challenge. 99% of the time, there's nothing to it, but it's good for your expert to understand it. Attribution, you have the non-moneyed spouse and a moneyed spouse. And the non-moneyed spouse may have no income, but they can work and make $40,000. So the judge will attribute income to her when calculating alimony and child support. Equitable distribution is when you divide the assets in the house. Like if you have a house with a mortgage and the 401k plans, it's usually divided 50-50, and you get half and the other spouse gets half. Alimony is sometimes called maintenance, basically to keep you, your standard of living. DV, domestic violence. You hear this a lot, DV, and they don't really tell you what it is, but you may understand domestic violence. Mediation versus arbitration. Mediation is when you want to use a mediator to solve some type of problem. Now, an arbitration is binding. So, for example, a mediator could say, I think you should get the kid 3 days a week. It's not binding. But the arbitrator could say, I think you should get 3 days a week. Well, that's binding. A psychometrician is someone who does a study of exam questions, is a scientist, and we use them in our exams to become a CFF, for example. We hired a psychometrician to help us out with make sure that the questions we were asking were valid in figuring out that you meet certain requirements. So, a vocational evaluation expert, again, this is someone who's brought in to evaluate a spouse who may not be working. If it's a lawyer, let's say she's a lawyer, but she's not in the market. Well, what can she earn if she was? Restricted stock units is, executives get all kinds of perks, and sometimes they'll have, millions of dollars worth of restricted stock that maybe didn't hit the strike price and is worth nothing, but maybe it will. We have ways of dealing with that. Deferred compensation. You could have an executive with $100,000, but they earned $1 million because $900,000 was deferred. Alimony modification, change of circumstances. Okay, after the divorce, you can go back and modify or change the alimony amount. PSA is the property settlement agreement. This is once you're divorced. The divorce, all the agreement is written in the property settlement agreement. You need to understand it. Don't sign unless you do. Prima facie burden, change it. It's your burden to prove change of circumstances if you want to go back after the divorce. So you should do it right the first time. And then prima facie just means accepted until proven incorrect. And what this means, again, it's basically everything is, once the divorce is final, everything's is considered correct unless you can prove it wrong. So make sure you do it right the first time. Hire a good forensic accountant. Hire a good attorney. Spend the time. Make sure your CIS statement's accurate. And a lot of people talk about the TCJA because that eliminated deduction for alimony. That was basically a tax law passed a couple of years ago, Tax Cut and Job Acts. Listen, guys, if you have any questions on this, just leave it below in the YouTube comment box, and I'll get back to you. One of my analysts will get back to you. Thanks for listening.